Hi y'all, and welcome back to the garden. So I'm kind of excited this evening because it just finished raining, so I'm not going to get anything done in the garden today. But we've had a couple thunderstorms this week, which the garden is desperately needed. Yesterday evening I got out here and I planted like 18 shrubs because it rained a little bit yesterday. But even with that little bit of rain, I could still hardly get the auger in the ground because it had been so dry. I had to water it a little more in and let that soak in before I could dig down far enough to plant some of these shrubs that I planted. But I've made a big dent into my shrub pile. As you might see on the ground around me, actually you may not because there's a lot of hose being dragged around still to water trees, but I did come through and run like a backbone drip line around these trees and put drip emitters on them. I'm still going to walk you through the drips process from start to finish, but I'm going to do that on the shade bed for now, and because I couldn't get to that in time, I went ahead and did this process so I wouldn't have to worry about watering those every day. So they've been really happy since I put them on drip, and it just kind of runs like, you know, if you watched the video a while ago, I ran one along the edge of the sidewalk in the little trench that I made here. I just connected it with a T there and ran it around all of these shrubs here to water that will be in the flower bed when I finish extending the bed out. Another thing, got some things planted. I'll go over those in a moment, but I've primarily been trying to focus on the past week because now that the evenings are getting, or the sun's setting earlier, I have maybe an hour to an hour and a half in the afternoon to work on the garden. So shooting videos during the week isn't really like that easy. And I've just been trying to get as much done as I can preparing for cooler weather. And so I ran that drip. I also planted some things up here and ran drip to them so I wouldn't have to keep them watered. We'll go over those in just a second. And I got a ton of things planted yesterday like I showed you. I have changed the landscape lights out, the bulbs anyway, to LED, mostly the ones on the house. I have not replaced these yet, which I will probably do in the spring, or I may do it this fall. Still got to think about that and look and see what the pricing would be. There's only a few of them, so it may not be too terrible. But let's go over some of the things that I got planted, because I did some of these probably a week and a half ago, but I haven't shot a video on them yet. I placed a yew here. This is a conical trimmed yew. Here I set up the concrete containers that I had from the old home with the spiral boxwoods in them. So I think that's really cute. Got to come in and mulch this entire area in preparation for winter. I planted a pufferfish hydrangea directly behind there that will get and fill this entire spot here. Pufferfish gets 4 to 5 foot tall and wide, so it is going to be quite of a presence there. But it'll look nice next to this Japanese maple that is absolutely baking, and I'll show you in a future video how I hope to keep this alive, because this summer has been really brutal on it, and I've been watering it since we moved in, but even before then it just been so dry and hot. And putting Japanese maples in these conditions against a brick in a corner, this is an east facing location, but still it's really tough on them if they're not getting sufficient water. You can actually see underneath here that several of the branches have been cut off because they've died. So to save this and can keep it happy, I've got an interesting solution I'll show you in a second video. This is the snowsicle hydrangea. I planted it here kind of in the center of this wall, so it'll grow up 5 to 6 foot tall and wide, so be similarly sized, if not a little taller than this Japanese maple. And these boxwoods are oddly like angled towards the house here, so I have a small area right behind here to plant something very thin, and I got to figure out what that will be. I've considered maybe one of the Rose of Sharon's that Proven Winners has, the pillar ones, because they stay really skinny and it would just grow up here along the wall. Because I'm already going to have some roses here along this wall. And if y'all have any recommendations for trellises, I'm considering getting some trellises custom made for this wall to fit perfectly. The person that installed the fence at this house 30 years ago, or whenever the fence was installed, is still doing things, and he could potentially make some for me. And so I might get some custom things here, but if y'all have any ideas of things that I can put here, I want something kind of modern, I don't want anything too decorative. I want to keep it kind of understated and let the roses speak for themselves. I did get these planted. I think I showed you that in a video. Down here, I planted a 𝗩𝗟𝗘𝗧𝗦 macrophylla hydrangea, which is doing really well in this location so far. It's been here about an entire week now. And then it'll have plenty of room to grow in there, and I'm hoping we'll get some beautiful blooms on this protected east side of the house. I think I showed you that I set up this concrete container that I had from the other house here as well in the center of this window. It might have shifted a little bit. This was just temporary for next spring, and I'll come through and re-level it in the spring if I need to. And we got some roses planted here. This is reminiscent coral. I've done a trio of them because that's what I had available, and so it will kind of mesh together and be just a really beautiful pop of color here. Kind of mid, it's not even really the back, mid of the bed, because this bed's going to go way past this evergreen here, or not way past, but right on the other side of it. But far enough here that there'll be plenty of planting space in front of it and areas that I can plant things behind it as well, so it can be viewed from both locations. This is a clethra called 𝗩𝗟𝗓𝗔𝗡𝗢 crystallina. I already planted one of those in the bed in the back a few weeks ago that I showed you. I have one more left that I'll be putting somewhere, not sure yet. And then I planted some little lime punch hydrangeas. And the hydrangeas that I planted this week, I have cut all of the blooms off of them but these, and I'm going to come through and cut these off as well so they can focus on rooting in and the blooms aren't sucking a whole lot of moisture out of the plant to keep it happy. But I wanted to show you the color of these because I am really impressed with this variety and just the pure color it is. It's not often that you see paniculatas like this beautiful pink color, especially this bright. Sometimes you'll see like a very kind of burgundy age color, but this is very like clear pink. And you can see these blooms right here that are a little older are not as happy because they went through a lot of stress coming from Michigan to my prior home and then coming here. But these are a little younger, are looking really nice. And so I got to get these on drip as well. We just had plenty of rain. These just got planted yesterday. Over here around the big giant boxwood that I planted more of the pufferfish hydrangeas, and I also planted those pretty closely so they'll just kind of merge together and be kind of a big white presence here between the boxwood and the yew. Now pufferfish is unique in that it doesn't tend to turn pink in the fall like a lot of paniculatas do, so it holds a more white or a faded limey color in fall, and those are looking kind of rough too because of my negligence, but they'll look perfectly fine next year. I'll probably come through and cut the blooms off of those as well so they can settle in nicely, so we won't have a lot of like standing blooms over winter, which is one of the reasons you can plant paniculatas, because they hold, or arborescens really, they hold their blooms all winter and they look really pretty with snow on them. Got to move in the breeze, and it just provides some structure. But we probably won't have any of that this winter because I want these things to focus on rooting in. And if you're planting anything this fall that might have blooms on it, I might encourage you to go ahead and cut those blooms off just so the plant's not putting any energy into those. Of course, after it goes dormant, it doesn't really matter, but those also on tiny plants like that, if they do catch snow or wind and the stems aren't strong enough, it could lead to branch breakage. So just a tip there, that if you have any of those in your landscape, especially those that are tinier, to maybe just go ahead and clip those blooms off of it, and the plant will be happier for it next year. So I have two priorities this coming weekend. One of them is to get drip on this shade bed that I planted up in the last video. The second priority would be to finish the mulch on the front bed. I think I'm going to go ahead and roughly edge that bed to the final shape that I want it. I'm not going to focus on getting it super straight. I intend to rent a machine in the spring and do all of my edging fresh, or look at purchasing a machine that I can do that with, since I'm going to be doing so many beds in the future. That would probably just be a good investment for me to have one on hand that I can work with. I also would like to do a bed right here, and I planted these last night. This is a hedge of Limelight Prime Hydrangeas. I actually made this bed. You haven't seen this bed yet. And how I made this was I put down painter's paper, and it is, I think I got it from Home Depot, and it was 140 feet long by 30, roughly 3 foot wide for $12. And so if you don't have access to cardboard and you just don't really want to hunt up a million newspapers when you're creating a bed, those are a really cost-effective solution to creating new flower beds. They're just thick enough. I would recommend you get not the thickest one because they have some that's very stiff and would be hard for water to penetrate. They have some that are really flimsy that would be really easy to tear when you dump mulch onto it. And then they have a middle thickness one, which is what I used here, that I literally created this bed in 2.5 hours Sunday morning. And so I edged it briefly. It's probably the worst edge I've ever made in my life. You can see how jagged it is, but I will fix that in the spring. I spent time and just literally picked up this chips that I got from Chip Drop last week and dumped them onto this paper that I laid down the same morning, and then let it sit for a few days. Now, preferably when you're creating these beds, you let them sit for a few months so the grass can completely die. Because I didn't do that and I went ahead and planted in them yesterday, so it's only been 3 or 4 days since I put this down, I will inevitably get grass growing through around where I planted the plants next spring, but I can pull those out. The focus here was getting the plants in the ground so they can get rooted rather than waiting another month and have them less acclimated as we're going into winter. We are potentially having an El Nino winter, it looks like, so it'll be drier here and potentially warmer weather, so I'm hopefully not as concerned about winter damage. But if you're having a dry winter, you also have to be equally as concerned with new plants dehydrating because they don't have a sophisticated or an extensive root system. So get your plants in as early as you can. That's why I'm trying to get just a bunch of stuff in the ground over the next week or so. So we'll have hopefully at least 4 weeks before our first frost and everything will be planted. I still have 15 or so shrubs probably that I need to get planted. We can go back there and count them. For anyone wondering what I'm talking about when I'm saying contractor's paper or painter's paper, it's the stuff on a roll here. And you can see it's thicker than newspaper, but it is thinner than cardboard, much thinner than cardboard, which means it'll break down quicker for you. But it still provides enough of a barrier in all cases that I've planted in it that the grass will die if left long enough. It may depend on the grass variety you have, but for here in Ohio, where we have cool season grasses primarily, this is sufficient to kill back the grass and weeds over a period of months because it starves it from light, especially after you throw mulch over it. And no light means dead plant. And I didn't take you through that process because I've taken my viewers on my channel through that process before. You were literally just roll it out on the ground. It was kind of windy the day I did it, so I put down some small rocks so it wouldn't tear, but also that would hold it down, and then I dumped mulch on top of it immediately after. And then that's it, really simple. And if you're interested in those videos, I would go back to, I have a series. It's like creating a new garden bed. There's like part 1, part 2, part 3. I think part 1's edging the bed, and I think part 2 is putting down paper like this or something similar, and then drip always is part of that process for me. When I create this bed here, which is going to run from this post down to where that Japanese maple is, I'll show you that process, but it is relatively pretty easy to do for anyone, and you don't have to worry about removing all the tape and stickers from cardboard boxes, which makes it really nice. There is a cost involved, but for $12 for 140 foot long by 3 foot wide roll of paper that can create a new bed for you, that's probably going to be more than most of the average homeowners may need, unless you're crazy like me and are making a ton of new beds. I think it's a really good value to make those beds really easy. Now on the other side of this bed, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to lay down 2 rows of paper and I'm going to create a bed there for right now. And I'm going to let that one sit a little longer, but it's probably only going to be a week or two because I need to get more plants in there. And what I'm going to be planting over there primarily are things that get a little taller, including some of my leftover dogwoods. I have a yellow Japanese maple that I think will pair nicely with this one. So I'm thinking, of course, I got drip. I also just laid down a small drip line here, but we'll talk about that later. It's not connected to anything. I will end up connecting it to this bed when I get it started, but I went ahead and just laid it around here and circled it around this tree because it's also struggled a little bit from the dry weather. So what I'm thinking is red Japanese maple, dogwood, yellow Japanese maple, and the other dogwood that I have. Actually, wait, I may put one of the dogwoods elsewhere. I also have a Carolina Sweetheart redbud, so I'm probably going to put it in the center on the other side to grow up and provide, you know, some nice shade up here eventually, because hopefully that crabapple's still got many years left, but it's looking kind of rough. So if we can keep some shade over in this area to protect this bed that I freshly planted in the future, that would be great. And to provide just some protection and privacy to the pool behind me, which we got closed. And I'm glad because I don't have to take care of it any longer. Let's take a look at some of the shrubs I have left over. I did have one of my coworkers come and dig like 4 things that I had in here. So I've got a few more things to remove, and then I would kind of like to get on covering this up and also putting mulch on top of it for winter. And this bed is just going to sit all winter to hopefully kill off anything that's left there and might be lurking in the shadows, so I can start planting next spring really early. All right, so this bed, or this grouping of what I have left over is kind of tiny. So a lot of this will be going out front. Some of it will be going out back where I just told you. We've got a few hydrangeas left, not too many actually. There's a couple pufferfish left over. There's 2 quickfire 𝗡𝗡, which I'm really excited about planting in the garden. And quickfire 𝗡𝗡 is one I considered putting a hedge in instead of Limelight Prime. But I decided to go with Limelight Prime because it's an improved version of Limelight, and Limelight is like the granddaddy of all of these paniculata hydrangeas. It's been incredibly popular. So Limelight Prime is an improved variety. I didn't go with Limelight primarily because the stems can be kind of floppy. I know from having hydrangea standards, the blooms just get so big that they can be pretty floppy. And Limelight Prime is supposed to be improved. The color is supposed to be improved and going into fall as well as it turns pink. And it's also just not supposed to get quite as big as Limelight. It says 6 to 8 foot tall and wide. Limelight itself can get really large. So I think Limelight Prime is going to be a good one. The only reason I considered quickfire 𝗡𝗡 is because it would bloom a little earlier. But I just decided to go with Limelight Prime because I had more of them available. So I'll continue the Limelight Prime hedge, and I can stick these beautiful quickfire 𝗡𝗡s somewhere else where they can be really more of a statement piece in the garden. So I've got these 2 dogwoods left. I have a couple Japanese maples, which I completely forgot about when I was planting the shade bed, that I was going to add one of those over there. So I might be able to fit one over in that location because a couple of them are supposed to stay pretty small. The yellow one that I have that's going to get a little bigger is one I'm going to add to that bed next to the fence I was just talking about. And this one I bought a couple years ago, but it's called Summer Gold. And I got it from Mr. Maple online, and it's grown, probably doubled in size since I got it. It's not supposed to burn as badly in the sun. Of course, I dug it up from the ground at my last home and then brought it over here, and it had kind of a rough transition. But I think it will do good once it gets settled in and it's put on drip adequately in that location over there. And it can grow up, and I think it gets kind of similarly sized to the maple that you just saw over there, the red one right back there. And so I think it'll be a really nice textural, well, not textural so much, but at least color contrast. Just got a few tiny things left over. The roses will go out front. This is an Illuminati Tower Mock Orange. We've got the Per Pink Lilac, and then the Double Blue. Let me see what this one is called. This is a big lilac, like an old-timey lilac, but it's really beautiful. Yeah, Double Blue, Centaur Double Blue. So it's getting buds, looks like, for next spring. So this one may go Actually, I'm thinking about putting it in the corner of the barn here after I remove all of these grasses over there. And this is one reason those grasses have to go. Since we haven't had a whole lot of rain or wind since we moved in, they have not done this, and now they look absolutely horrible, and they've just been allowed to grow out of control. So those will be completely removed, and it's going to be a mess. Those grasses are really sharp. I actually got a paper cut trying to cut some of them back the other day, and I'm not going to have that. I do love grasses in the garden. Some are really beautiful. I don't have a lot of them because they can be kind of messy, but I love gardens that integrate a lot of them. Just not something I like to keep up with so much. So you pick your battles. Grasses aren't one of them, but I will be incorporating some that I've loved before, like totem pole. That's one that'll probably go up front. It's a beautiful blue, very skinny, upright grass. It gets pretty tall. And some other ones, I think Cheyenne Sky is also a really beautiful one that I like. What's it called? Morning Light, I think, is a really good one that I like that I had at the other house. So I'm going to be incorporating some of those things that I like back into this garden next year as I get some of the more beds established. And I think the last thing I want to show you before I wrap this video up for today is I got another chip drop. So I requested one like the same day my last one was delivered, and I got it in a week, less than a week. But the quality of the chips was not as good as the first time. So you can definitely tell that the arborist who brought the first one had a much better shredder on them. Those chips were pretty much mulch quality already. They were fine enough that they could have been probably considered a triple shred mulch, maybe a double shred mulch. The new one that I got has much more sticks in it and the chips are bigger, but that doesn't mean they're not usable and won't be useful in the garden. I will probably use them around the fence to start the beds around the pool this fall. That's will probably be one of the last projects I do because I'm not actually going to be planting anything in those. But you can see them here, how many more sticks they have in them, how worsely shredded they are. So this is, they gave me way more though than the last one. So it was a really big truck, and I have two piles here. You can see it smoking. It's already composting a little bit now that we got a little water. But this is the old pile, so you can see how nice those look and how finely shredded they are. And this is the new one, but totally usable either in the vegetable garden or elsewhere on the property. And I'll continue using this nice stuff in the beds that I'm going to be planting in this fall because it's a really nice quality. I still have some leftover actual mulch that I purchased that's been aged and is more ready to go and be incorporated into garden beds over here. I just love having all this space to be able to just put stuff back here. My last property that I lived in was an HOA, so felt really obligated when I had mulch delivered to, and I've spread a ton of mulch every year, upwards of like 12 to 20 yards depending on the year in my last garden, and I would get it all delivered and feel the urge to get it all cleaned up in the day, which made for a really long day, often at really hot parts of the year when that was being done. So I don't have to worry about that as much. I can cover it up with a tarp if I want to, or just let it sit out here and kind of naturally age in compost and turn it with a tractor as I need to. And it makes me feel so much better. Not quite as much stress having to deal with it. So because it just rained and we have like 30 more minutes of sunlight, I'm going to just call this day a wash because it did rain and I will be a muddy mess if I come out here and try and do anything. But I wanted to give you a little update. Hopefully I can get drip on this bed this weekend so I don't have to continue overhead watering it, and we can move on with other projects in the garden as those come up. Thank you guys for joining me today, everyone, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care.